Right. So you're going to need to know whether this is a covered event or not for the equipment, right? Um, Depending what policy they're handling. Again, we don't get too much into policy, but as a past adjuster, you might what they call the ensuing smoke. You might still have to deal with that. Okay, so that's a hard part of the claim. But what about the equipment itself? I mean, does the policy owe for a repair to that boiler or a new boiler, a new furnace because there's so much black oily smoke in there it can't be cleaned, and now they're making claim for this, $8,000 to $10,000 furnace and all the ductwork, right? You kind of need to know what happened to it, and the kind of the reason to get help is to make a coverage decision, right? And that's where the technicians come in. Again, adjusters can't open these things up. They're not doing the testing. They're not taking nozzles out and checking them. They're not looking for cracked heat exchangers. They're not pulling out faulty ignition switches and that sort of thing, which by the way, if that's something that could go to subro, you might want to find out there's a liable third party. Maybe there's a recall notice on that faulty ignition switch, right? Or something, or maybe a technician worked on this thing last week and they did something wrong. They didn't put it back together right. Something went haywire with that. You're going to want to know that as well. So, yeah, what it looks like from that standpoint is having somebody being able to look at it objectively, open it up, and do testing, and then so you can figure out what happened. But still, then you have to know what the extent of it is. Or is there so much smoke in there we can't clean it anymore? It's completely covered. The inside gets inside that insulation I was talking about in the furnace cabinet. Is it also a split system? So it has an evaporator coil on top of the furnace. Is that evaporator coil completely covered now in black smoke? And if you know how coils are built, you can imagine would be almost impossible to clean because of black oily smoke. You're going to be minimally replacing that, and then the ductwork. And we talked about it on the other podcast. What kind of ductwork is it? Rigid metal ductwork like we talked about, maybe we can clean it. Oily smokes can be a little bit more challenging, but you're into the flex duct or you're into the rigid fiberboard or things like that, you're going to be replacing all that ductwork. It's hard to get to. It's in those places I mentioned before, like the crawl spaces, the attics, the walls, things like that, basements. And then how much does it cost? Right? That the adjuster, you get all the other stuff right, you still have to know what it costs. Is it the proper pricing? Estimatics platforms aren't always the best when it comes to technical items, especially HVAC items and ductwork items. In my personal experience, it just doesn't have enough line items, not the right pricing. Could be brand specific, could be access specific. I mean, it's a lot easier to install ductwork in the attic of a basement than it is in a crawl space or an attic. In a basement, it's easier. Attic, very difficult. It's going to cost more money to do that. Got to get all that right. All the stars have to align to figure all those things out on a puffback claim.